Bulavanaka and welcome to Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. I'm your host Dion Davu, and joining us on today's episode of Speak Your Mind are representatives of a non-profit organization committed to supporting and empowering children and teachers in underdeveloped Pacific nations with the basic resources and knowledge to further their early childhood education. Now, Fiji Kids Charitable Trust is being represented today by one of its first ambassadors and co-founders, Mr. Patrick Osborne, who also happens to be a professional rugby player and member of our Flying Fijians rugby team. Also with us in studio today are media personality and avid supporter of worthy causes, Ms. Drew Slatter, as well as two other rugby professionals and Fiji Kids ambassadors, Mr. Timothy Jim Nangusa and Mr. Ben Volavola, both of whom are also representatives of our national 15-a-side rugby team. Welcome to Speak Your Mind, and thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to join us on today's episode and talk about the Fiji Kids Charitable Trust, as well as the roles that each of you play as ambassadors of the organization. Now, first up, Patrick, since you're the lead man in this, what is Fiji Kids and what is the main aim of this organization?
Well, Dion, thanks for having us here. You pretty much hit it on the head when you introduced us. We're a non-profit organization focused in early childhood education.
So basically, Fiji Kids focuses on the very early childhood, like preschool and early primary school years.
Yep.
But in this case, your main target is kindergarten students and preschoolers. And moving on, like, what are some of the core values that of Fiji Kids? Ben, would you like to answer that?
Yes. Our core values basically links with what we represent, and that's basically striving to provide a better learning experience for these young kids.
And Drew, in your situation, how do you feel? The core values of Fiji Kids, are you is the team putting the message across, getting out there with basically all your workshops that the team conducts across the country?
Yeah, I mean, like Ben said, providing a better learning experience and making learning attractive to kids, because that's the age where you're supposed to fall in love with learning, you know. Ages 3 to 7, you don't want to sit in a classroom.
I see.
Basically, you know, none of us really wanted to. But Fiji Kids works on making education accessible and enjoyable. And I think we've got the easy job. We're just the ambassadors, you know, we just raise the platform. Whereas the trainers that come in, they're our like foot soldiers, you know, they're doing the hard work, training the teachers, doing the workshops, and I think they've been doing really well.
And moving on with the questions, how exactly is Fiji Kids funded? From where exactly does it receive its funding to carry out its work? I take, for example, the workshop that you're holding this week. Where would exactly does Fiji Kids receive its funding from?
We get our funding from different organizations. One is EC Center in New Zealand. They're a big supporter for us. Also, the Ministry of Education, and this year we got the Methodist Church as well. So. And USB as well from last year. Yeah, that's about all of them, and just big thanks to them for like putting the time in, and whichever way they support us, and yeah, big thanks.
So Patrick, you made mention of the ECE, that's the Early Childhood Education Center, that's in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Of course, you ply your trade in New Zealand, so you've obviously gone over to those guys and got in contact with them to help you with the Fiji Kids Trust, right?
Yeah, we have one of their workers with us at the moment. They're running the workshop back in Davui level at the MLTC
Training Center.
Training Center, Methodist Church.
So basically, that'll lead me to my next question. Now, does Fiji Kids work with any sort of government industries, or rather ministries, and which one would they be? If they do indeed work, do you guys do indeed work with other ministries, maybe other shareholders in this very important sector, I would say?
Just the main one is Ministry of Education. Yeah, they helped us a lot when we first came to Fiji, and just them.
That's great to hear. And yes, now a proper childhood education is just as important as a secondary or tertiary education. Now, this question I'm going to pose to all four of you. Now, what kind of early childhood education did you have, and how do you think you have benefited if you were part of what the EduFiji Kids is teaching now, especially given the lives and careers that you all lead now? Ben, we'll start off with you.
I had growing up a regular young Fijian boys kindergarten to early primary school learning experience, and I think the great thing about what we're doing is, personally, as an individual, I'm sort of a guy that learns hands-on, and growing up, and still to this point, I find it hard just learning things just theory-based, and what we're sort of incorporating is a practical-based kind of learning experience. So I think if I had this while I was growing up, I would have been able to not just intake more information, but probably would have enjoyed learning and going to school and picking up new things along the way.
I see. And Patrick, how do you feel about this? Like, if you had the chance to be part of the EduFiji Kids while you were growing up, while you were a kindergartner in your formative years, how would you feel that your education or your career would have gone if you had had a better start to your educational life?
Oh, I'm not too sure.
Let's put it like this. So, would you like to change some things that you learned while you were smaller, when as a kindergartner?
No,
No.
because I'd never change what's history. History is history, and like this is for the kids of tomorrow and the leaders of tomorrow and all that stuff. So what I've gone through, I've enjoyed, and I'd never want to change that. That's all good memories and all from my kindergarten just up the road, Holy Trinity Anglican, Kinley.
So I'd be safe in saying that you had a good early childhood education. That's why you don't really have any regrets.
Because when we first started the organization, like my cousin Nikki, she came over, and then we sort of discussed the ideas of all this stuff, and for me, I have heaps of good memories from kindy. That's why I wanted to go into it and try and make it fun, so that some other kids can have good memories, and probably like because of that they like excel in education. So
I see. Thanks for that, Patrick. And moving to you, Drew, how do you feel about this? That, yes, what kind of early childhood education did you have, and how do you think you would have benefited if you were part of what EduFiji Kids is teaching now?
I was, like Patrick, I was really blessed with a great kindergarten teacher, great early childhood experience. Similar to a lot of the stuff that EduFiji Kids encourages, independence of thought, playful processes, playing with a purpose, not just sitting and cramming and, be quiet, don't ask questions. And I think that reflects a lot in the fact that I never stop talking now, is from, a really encouraging early childhood experience. So yeah, like Patrick said, that was another reason I wanted to get in, because I've seen cases where it isn't that great, A lot of kids, like Ben, don't get a practical, no, I'm not saying, but like how Ben mentioned,
Yes.
if you're more hands-on, a lot of the time there's not a real enabling environment.
I see.
So I think EduFiji Kids is working towards improving that.
And Jim, what are your thoughts on this matter?
Me, I grew up in the village. It was not the same. But I'm thankful that I'm here, that I get to learn the important things of empowering early childhood education. Only wish I could be there at that time to learn what I've learned now. But that's why I've joined up with the EduFiji Kid to be an ambassador to drive and empower the teachers on how important it is to educate early childhood.
Thank you for that, Jim.
Thanks.
Of course, do stay with us. We've got more coming up after the break. With us in studio right now, representing EduFiji Kids, is, yes, Mr. Ben Volavola, Mr. Patrick Osborne, Mr. Drew Slatter, and Mr. Jim Nangusa. We'll have more for you in our next segment. Bulavinaka, and welcome back to Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. I'm your host, Dion Davu, and joining us in studio today, representing the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust, we've got Ben Volavola, Patrick Osborne, Jim Nangusa, and Drew Slatter. They're all ambassadors of the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust, and they're with us here in studio today to tell us more about their organization and its work. Once again, to the four of you, thank you very much for taking the time out to be with us on the program.
No problem.
And yes, moving on with our questions. Now, Jim, you made a very good point in our last segment that you grew up in the village and that you didn't have quite the best early childhood education. But in your career as a rugby player, traveling all around the world and plying your trade, no doubt you've also learned some things along the way, and this is your way of giving back to the next generation. Now, of course, that's what EduFiji Kids is all about, isn't it? And moving on, does EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust as an organization feel that more effort is needed on part of educators and the key stakeholders in the education sector to help provide better early childhood education services? Now, Drew, what do you think about that?
I think like anything else, there's always room for improvement. But just from the past, I've only been involved for 2 years, and I can speak for Iki's regarding to the first year. The pool of talent and the passion of Fijian teachers is abundant, Coming from a developing island nation, yes, we are always in want of more resources, which is what EduFiji Kids does. But I think at this moment in time, the stakeholders are doing the best that they can with what they have. The passion of early childhood educators we've seen here is immense. So I think, like I said, they're doing the best that they can with what they have.
And moving on, a question to our three rugby players. Ben, you play your rugby in Australia. Patrick, you play your rugby in New Zealand, and Jim plays his rugby in France. Between the three of you, of course, you would have seen there's a gap between our education sector and the education systems in the countries that you play with. Would you say that the countries that you live and work in have better early childhood education systems than Fiji, and is Fiji moving on the right track towards getting there? Jim, let's start with you.
I'll say in France there's a bigger difference than Fiji, because they go to early childhood at 2 or 3.
At 2 years old, they start going.
Yeah, because one of the things is because the parents work, so they put their child there and then they go to work, and yeah.
I see. And Patrick, for you living and working in New Zealand, what are your experiences like in regards to early childhood education? I understand you're also a parent as well.
Yeah, 3 kids. Got 2 daughters and a son. My son just started class 1. It's about the same as France. They get to go to school at 2 in New Zealand, but you can put them in earlier, as after they turn 6 months, for the real busy parents.
So in New Zealand, if you're really busy and you can't look after your kids, and even if they're only just a little over 6 months old, you can take them to early childhood education centers,
Yes.
daycare centers, and have them looked after and their needs taken care of.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to spend a bit of money on that as well.
Yes, that's why most people wait until they're 2, and then the government helps them pay
I
for
see.
that for kindy, because it's quite expensive to put kids into kindy in New Zealand. So yeah.
I see. And Ben, in your case, what about in Australia? How are things like in Australia as far as early childhood education goes?
It's quite similar to the boys, and I guess it just falls back onto the resources that are available for these kids and the families, and the affordable aspect of things, with families being able to afford to send their kids to school at an early age. And then Paddy just touched on like government schemes that help these families to be able to send their kids to gain early education. So there's a couple of things where I think our country can make a few steps forward, but and like Drew said, I think our education system is making inroads and forward steps towards bettering early childhood education.
Thanks for that, Ben. Moving on. Now, you all made mention early that EduFiji Kids works with the Ministry of Education. Now, at this moment in time, Drew, I'm going to pose this question to you. At this moment in time, do you feel that more work is needed on the part of the ministries and all the other relevant stakeholders? It seems like Edu Fiji Kids is taking the lead in this, because whilst I was doing my research for this episode, it would seem that no other organization in Fiji is doing what your organization, on the organization that you're part of, seems to be the only one that's doing this. Do you feel that there could be more work done on the part of other shareholders and stakeholders in the education industry?
Definitely, more work could be done from all parties, but we have to take into consideration that the Ministry of Education is how we put our foot in the door in the first place, and we're very thankful towards them. That's just an example of a step they're taking. Them partnering with Edu Fiji Kids is proof that the Ministry of Education is placing just as much importance on early childhood education as primary, tertiary, secondary. So yes, more could be done, but we sitting here today are an example of one step that is being done.
Thank you for that. Now moving on, tell us more about the Edu Fiji Kids workshops and how things are coming along with those programs. Now, Jim, I'll pose this question to you. Workshops, what exactly do you do when you attend a Edu Fiji Kids workshop?
I was blessed to be with the workshop last year, so I was part of the workshop in Sawani, along with the Ministry of Education. I'm just there to be, there's an example to be used by our trainers, and I'll be there to support them in any ways they want. Plus, yeah.
And yes, moving on, where now, of course, Jim just made an example of where the last one workshop was held. Now, how often are these workshops held, Patrick?
We try to come back to Fiji every year, and we try and make it so that everybody's in Fiji at the time of the workshop. So we try and put each other's schedules together and work out which is the best time for most of us to attend, because there's quite a few ambassadors, and only the Jojo's not here.
I see.
So Jojo is he plays rugby in Japan, so they've started their pre-season, so he couldn't be here.
So there are quite a number of other ambassadors of the Edu Fiji Kids Charitable Trust who, due to some other reasons, aren't here at this moment.
Oh, there's just one more left.
Just one more?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yes, and Ben, in your case, how's the feedback? How do you feel the feedback is from participants in these workshops?
So we just came back from one not too long ago, and a lot of the students there and also the teachers are very happy to be there, and just to see our faces, to be able to be there to support what we're doing, and for them to be there to get more experience, have the opportunity to, I guess, gain knowledge on how to better themselves on teaching and make things more fun for these kids, I guess.
Thank you, Ben. And yes, do stay with us. We'll have more in our next segment of Speak Your Mind. Our guests today in studio, representatives of Edu Fiji Kids. They are Ben Volavola, Patrick Osborne, Drew Slater, and Jim Nangusa. I'm Dion Dhamu, and we'll have more in our next segment. Bulvinaka, and welcome back to Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. I'm your host, Dion Dhavu, and we thank you for joining us on Gold FM, only the classic hits. With us today in studio, the Edu Fiji Kids Charitable Trust. They're all about empowering children and teachers in the Pacific, so support the cause. Hashtag I want, I give. And yes, representing the organization today in studio, we've got 4 of their ambassadors. Mr. Ben Volavola, also Mr. Jim Nangusa, Mr. Drew Slater, and Mr. Patrick Osborne. Now, over this short advertisement break, I learned something new. It's called Play with a Purpose. Now, this is part of what you conduct in your workshops that you carry out across the country. And yes, kickstarting things, Ben, can you just fill me in on a little bit more what Play with a Purpose means?
So we wanted to incorporate what every kid loves to do, which is playing games and learning, and incorporate the two. So I guess in a short sort of explanation, that's what it is.
I see. And Patrick, now can you give us an example of what Ben was talking about? Please Play with a Purpose.
We have little games, yeah, little activities to do that like using sticks or jackstones and, counting and, just learning shapes and stuff like that. So that's basically it.
I see. And Drew, are there any other sort of activities that you all carry out during the workshops, during the course of the workshops?
So the activities mentioned by Ben and Patrick are ones we use for the kids a lot. And another one that is really popular in the workshops is messy play. And it's popular amongst a lot of the kindergarten teachers because they get to rub paint all over these very handsome rugby players. But the idea is that you're learning to teach kids that it's okay to make a mess sometimes because you can always clean it up after. So that's teaching problem solving. It's teaching hand-eye coordination because, you're moving hands, you're painting things. It's teaching colors, it's teaching drawing shapes. But yeah, the main idea behind messy play is that so often we reprimand children for making a mess, and it makes them feel like it's such a hopeless situation. Whereas if you let them make a mess, it teaches them that, yes, I can make a mistake, but I can always fix it.
I see. And Jim, moving on to you, would you happen to see some events, or rather some sort of the activities being carried out in the workshops which you feel, hey, these activities really are fun and educational? I wish I sort of had something of the sort when I was young. Have you seen any of that, of the like?
Oh yeah, sure. Because I was in the last workshop, we did all that. It was very interesting. Even the kids around, they were like screaming, and I was there with Drew.
And of course, no
Paint thrown all over you.
no doubt, while the four of you walk into any specific location, there's going to be smiles all around. And yes, moving on with our questions. Patrick, you are one of the first ambassadors, and also I've been told that you are one of the founders as well of the Fiji Kids Charitable Trust here in Fiji. Now, how exactly did you become involved with the Fiji Kids Charitable Trust, and what's it like being an Fiji Kids ambassador?
Me and Iki is my cousin, and that at the time I was playing for the Chiefs, and I went up to Auckland. It's about an hour drive away, and sort of caught up with her and had tea one afternoon, and just started talking about what she was doing, and that's where the idea came up, because she's a kindy teacher, and she had her friends, heaps of her friends were kindy teachers, and then we just thought about going back to Fiji and just sort of adding to the early childhood education
In other words,
system.
giving back
Yeah.
to the community.
Yeah.
And Ben, how did you get involved with Fiji Kids?
So I was in New Zealand for a year last year and actually met up with Paddy to catch up, and then sent me a text and asked if I was interested in joining the team. And yeah, it's probably a way that I could give back to the community, and especially to the community back home.
And how do you feel whenever you walk into whenever you accompany the team to a workshop and you walk in and the smiles on the faces of the kids and the next generation all happy to see that the four of you giving back? How do you feel about this?
It's a special moment. It's not just with the workshops, but we've had a couple of visits over our stay here with the Fiji team, and we've visited a couple of schools, and just their reaction to seeing us and the impact that we have on their lives just by watching us on TV, and now being able to give something back to them is, I think, the least that we could do.
Thanks for that, Ben. And Jim, over to you. You live all the way in France. Now, you live and work there in France. It's all the way on the other side of the world. How did you become involved with Fiji Kids? Was it through your rugby brothers over here, or did you find out through the charitable trust through other means?
I knew one of the founder, Iki, so she did get in touch with me and asked me if I want to be part of the charity organization. And I always want to be part of something that's going to give back to the community, to Fiji. So I was keen, and I signed up, and here I am.
Thank you for that, Jim. And Drew, yes, over to you. How did you become a member of the Fiji Kids Trust, and how are things coming along in regards to you being an ambassador?
I first met Iki through my partner, who is the only ambassador that isn't here, Joseph Alilindamu. He's also an ambassador, and so he introduced me to Iki. He was an ambassador first, and it was a solely male-dominated ambassador group. So Iki thought it would be nice to have another female on board, and it's been awesome. I really admire these I'd like to say I admire these boys because it's easy to be a sports player and represent a big brand. You know, it's easy to represent Nike. It's easy to represent commercial brands. But to be a face of something you're not going to get any monetary value out of, and to come home and put in time, I think that's really admirable.
Thank you for that, Drew. Of course, with us in studio today on Gold FM's Speak Your Mind, we've got ambassadors of the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust. They are Mr. Ben Volavola, Mr. Patrick Osborne, Jim Nangusa, and of course, Miss Drew Slatter. We'll have more for you in our next segment of Speak Your Mind. Bulavinaka, and welcome back to Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. I'm your host, Dion Davu, and joining us in studio today from the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust, we've got 4 of their ambassadors, Mr. Jim Nangusa, Ben Volavola, and also Patrick Osborne and Miss Drew Slatter. Once again, thank you very much to the 4 of you for taking the time out to be with us on the show. Moving back into the questions, Patrick, how has being an EduFiji Kids ambassador affected your life? What are a few of the things that you feel that you get back from involving yourself with the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust?
Yes, I think from the first time we came over for the workshop, and like I learned heaps from the workshop, and sort of helped me as a parent as well. So I know how to like control my kids, and you know, like all the how we were small and we used to get hidings and stuff. All that stuff is like all old, and you know, like it's not good for the kids.
Sort of outdated now.
Yeah, outdated discipline. You know, there's other ways. They love iPads, so you know, try and bribe them sometimes.
I see. And Ben, how has being involved with the trust changed your life? You feel you're a better communicator with kids, with the younger generation, maybe in your family, your relatives, and or if your siblings, perhaps. How do you feel that that the trust has affected your life? Has it affected, of course, for the better? There's some things that made you realize as a human being.
Yeah, it's definitely affected me in a positive way. It's communicating with the kids. I mentioned it before that a lot of the times when we are off with our training schedules, we go visit schools, and I guess being in this team and chatting with kids on a regular basis when we do these workshops, it helps, and that communication between the two parties is smoother, and I guess you relate to them as well with sort of comparing my early education in Australia to what the kids here experience, and you sort of think about it that you took it for granted as a kid back in Australia, and you appreciate what the kids are going through now.
I see. And for you, Drew, how do you feel about being an ambassador for EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust? How has being an ambassador helped you in your day-to-day life? Have you learned some new things? Maybe you've made changes to the way you interact with the younger members of your family. How do you feel about being an ambassador of EduFiji Kids?
It's like Ben said, it's definitely been a positive impact. Like I mentioned earlier, to not just represent a worthy cause, but be a part of an education stage that is often overlooked. And I think we can all agree that we've really learned about the importance of a proper early childhood education, and we've learned the way a child, it's easier for a child to learn. It's easier to interact with children. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I have younger siblings that require kini every now and then, but learning different systems of allowing them to learn and to enjoy learning, most importantly.
And moving to you, Jim, you made mention earlier on that when you were growing up, you didn't sort of have the chance, because you grew up in the village, you didn't have the chance to attend kindergarten or sort of receive a proper early childhood education. Being a member, being an ambassador of the EduFiji Kids Trust, how does that make you feel now? Do you feel that as an ambassador of the trust, that you'll go back home to your village and the surrounding villages and actually help the people, encourage them to set up proper kindergarten, proper early childhood education programs back home in the village?
Yeah, it's been a blessing to be part of this organization. When I got an invitation, I did a little research about early childhood education, and I read about how important it is to really educate the kids growing up, because sometimes we are surprised about what kids are saying. You know, when they hear little things, they'll be like, oh, how did he say that? How did you know that? And because getting to know that their brain growth at that level is really good from 3, 4, 5. So getting to know that I have a different approach in approaching kids, especially in like different situations and circumstances that I go through involving kids. So I'm really blessed to be here, knowing what I know now, and at the status I'm in today as a rugby player, I can make an impact, hopefully in now and the future, and going back to France and trying to send some stuff to help move this forward.
Thank you for that, Jim. Now, you talked about sending some stuff, and basically, Fiji Kids Charity, it's of course in the name, it's a charitable trust. And yes, how are the what would you say, for the workshops, the equipment, all the learning tools, the learning aids, these are all donations? Each of you in your own capacity as ambassadors helping out to get donations for Fiji Kids Charitable Trust. How does this work?
Yeah, I mean, like Jim said, they assist in the capacity that they can, but a lot of the resources are primarily provided by our Early Childhood Education Centre in New Zealand, that is in partnership with Fiji Kids. And along with the resource kits, you know, they send to be able to set up their own curriculums here. They send trainers so that we're not just sending a whole bunch of stuff that, you know, that we expect them to use, but they're sending people to teach the teachers how to utilize the resources that we're providing.
Thank you for that, Drew. And moving on, Patrick, how big is the Fiji Kids organization right now? Is it just sort of based in Suva, or do you work VT level wide, Vanuatu level wide, Fiji wide? How big is the organization?
We're growing, and from the first year, numbers have like doubled every year we've come through. And I said this morning when we opened the workshop in Davui level that I was really, happy to see the numbers that came this morning to the workshop. And I guess we've got people all over the world, and I guess if just anybody wanting to come and sign up for the workshops or anything, just hit us up on Facebook, our Facebook page, or yeah.
I see. And Ben, going with what Patrick said, you launched a workshop this morning in Davui level. Can you just describe for our listeners and our viewers what was involved in that workshop this morning?
It was pretty simple, and we started with a devotion, and then just an introduction with all the ambassadors and the people that work behind the scenes, and then photos with some of the teachers and the students. And then just as we left, there was a presentation that was being held to educate and I guess show the teachers and the students there what to expect.
Thank you for that, Ben. And yes, we're on Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. I'm your host, Dion Davu. Joining us in studio today, our ambassadors from the Fiji Kids Charitable Trust, Ben Volavola, Patrick Osborne, Jim Nangusa, and Miss Drew Slatter. We'll have more for you in our final segment of Speak Your Mind. Bulavinaka, and welcome back to Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. We're in our final segment, and with us today in studio, representing the Fiji Kids Charitable Trust, we've got with us in studio Jim Nangusa, Miss Drew Slatter, as well as Ben Volavola, and yes, Mr. Patrick Osborne. Once again, to the four of you, thank you very much for being with us in studio today. And of course, yes, we've reached the final segment of the program. Now, Patrick, you made mention earlier on about the Fiji Kids Foundation growing. It's growing ever since it began, and the workshops that have been held since, the numbers have just keep increasing exponentially. Now, Drew, I want to put this question to you. Of course, like Patrick mentioned, the organization is growing. Now, what I'm trying to get at is Fiji Kids only available here in Suva? How does one, if you're interested in being a part of the charitable trust, or maybe if you're interested in the services that the trust provides, how would one go about getting in touch with the trust?
Well, I mean, you're right in saying at the moment we're in a centralized location, primarily because it's it's what we're financially capable of doing, because we're bringing in partners from New Zealand and it's easier to house them here. Saying that, the attendees of the workshops are from all over Fiji, because we've been fortunate enough to work with USP, with the Ministry of Education, and this year with the Methodist Church. So through their networks, we've gotten in touch with ECE teachers from Central Division in Suva and also the rest of Fiji. I'm trying to remember the second half of your question. Yes, how do people get in touch? So like Patrick said, we have our Facebook page. We also have our EduFiji Kids website. But really, it's mostly been through the ministry's channels and USP's channels and the Methodist Church channels that we've gotten in touch with our participants. But you're more than welcome to check us out online. Pop us an email, and our partners in New Zealand and here would be more than happy to include anyone interested in our workshops.
Now, you made mention of the University of the South Pacific, the Ministry of Education, as well as the Early Childhood Education Centre in New Zealand. Are there any other stakeholders involved with the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust?
This year, we're working with the Methodist Church and their MLTC Centre in Levu, which is where we just were. So this is our first year working with them, and they've just come on board to be a stakeholder.
I see. And if someone was interested in perhaps becoming an ambassador of the EduFiji Kids Trust, now does the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust choose its ambassadors, or can someone actually volunteer to be a spokesperson and ambassador, so to speak? Patrick, would you like to take that one, since you seem to be lost in thought there?
I'm thinking. I think we the founders all sit together and well, you can get in touch with us if you wanna be an ambassador, and then we'll have a meeting.
So basically, if someone wants to become an ambassador,
Yeah.
for example, if I would like to become an ambassador of EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust, I would sort of contact you guys, give my name in, and then you'll all have a meeting to see, shall we
Yeah.
vote this gentleman in or
basically.
not? I see, very interesting. And for those people wishing to access the services of the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust, namely the early childhood education kindergarten teachers, how would they do so? Basically just contacting the
Just
trust?
Facebook or the
And on
EduFiji
Facebook,
Kids.
that's EduFiji Kids, the Facebook. And what would be their email address for our listeners and viewers, if one of you would like to supply that?
Funnily enough, we all communicate on Viber.
I see.
So we'd have to get back to you with the actual email address of the trust.
But if anyone's interested in the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust and the works that it does, all they simply need to do is head on over to Facebook.
Yeah. Or get in touch with Marie Koroi. She's one of the hard workers in behind the scenes, and
I see. And of course, what upcoming plans does the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust have in store for the near future?
So alongside our annual workshops, at the moment, we only have the capacity to host one a year. I mean, they'd like to. We have quite a few more ideas in the pipeline, but like Patrick said, because it's such a wide-reaching organization, we have representatives all over the world. It really depends on when everyone can be in the country at the same time, because it's really important that we're all hands-on. Yeah.
So everyone's sort of working towards one goal, but it all depends on everyone's schedules. That'll be something safe to say. Well, yes, and what's the most important thing that each of you would like members of the public to know about EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust? Ben, we'll start with you.
I guess that we're passionate about what we're doing with this trust, and anyone that's passionate about doing something they take seriously, and as this, I guess, trust continues to grow in with our workshops, then that's just a positive thing.
I see. And Drew, would you like to pass on a message to members of the public in regards to the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust?
Yeah, like Ben said, we're super passionate about what we do, but at the end of the day, we're just regular people that care about our kids, that care about our siblings, and about how important it is that at that stage where they're a sponge, it's so important to encourage independent learning. You might not be able to afford a fancy kindergarten, but you can always afford to play with your kids and to teach them that it's such an exciting thing to learn.
And Jim, for you, yes, what important message would you like to pass on to our viewers and listeners, especially those in the villages and in the outer islands, what important message would you like to pass on in regards to the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust and an important early childhood education?
I think just one of the most important things that I would like to share with the people back home is just try and know and learn, know what you do with the kids, and if you have something you can give, or if you don't have something you can give, then you cannot share it. But speaking on that, like education is very important, and get this kind of education that we are trying to empower will really help people back home.
Thank you for that, Jim. And yes, over to you, Patrick. You began our session today, and of course you end it. What's the most important thing that you, being an ambassador of EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust, would like members of the public to know?
Oh, just awareness. We're here and we're growing, and if you want to know more about us, jump on our Facebook page and give us a like or something. If you want to attend one of the workshops, give us a message on there. And just big thanks to all the organizations involved, USP, Ministry of Education, Methodist Church, the ECE Centre owners in New Zealand, and thanks to you for having us, and it's been a good time.
Thank you very much to the four of you for joining us on Gold FM's Speak Your Mind. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. And yes, all the best with the EduFiji Kids Charitable Trust, and for our three Flying Fijians, all the best with the World Cup qualifiers as well. This is Speak Your Mind for another week. I'm Dion Davu.